Good afternoon. Okay. And welcome to the Governance Risk and Audit Committee on the Tuesday, the 3rd of June, 2025. And the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence.
So I've received apologies from Councillor Sarah Buttercoper and Saul Penfold.
Thank you. Are there any public questions? And item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any items, declaration of interest? No. Thank you. Items of urgent business. So item 6 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Governance Risk and Audit Committee held on the 25th of March 2025. Do we have any questions or not questions, any alterations on the minutes, queries?
If I may, if you look at the last meeting, 3 out of the 6 members weren't able to attend. We got here today, 2 out of the 6 aren't able to attend. I don't know what notice you received about others not being able to come here, but was there a lot of notice? Because otherwise, if we had noticed that people weren't able to come here, we could ask both groups whether they have opportunities for deputies. It's an important committee, and if we only got sort of partial representation every time, we never seem to have 6 people here at any of the meetings I go to these days. That's quite a change from what it used to be. So I think that's a concern I'd like to raise.
Yes, thank you. I think we ought to note it. I think we knew Councillor Buttercoper was not going to be here, but I hadn't heard until the last minute. I know Councillor Penfold was intending to attend, so we would have been 5, should have been 5 out of 6. So as of yesterday, as far as I was aware, he was intending to attend. So
if I may come back, there are some people, I don't mean to point anywhere, but there are some people who obviously do. I understand people are working and I do struggle to get to these meetings, but clearly as a group leader, I try to appoint people who I know can get to meetings on a regular basis. Otherwise, the meeting, it reduces the effectiveness of those meetings. So I think that really ought to be passed back, and particularly to your group.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. I will pass it on to the group. I think it is a good and valid point. Thank you. Have we got a proposer and a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Cushing. Thank you. Are there any questions arising from the minutes before we move on to the next item? If not, I've got a couple of questions. On page 8, paragraph 2, says the chair noted the action minute 110 to provide a written update at the next meeting on progress of the recommendation, and we haven't had the written update yet. It's still been outstanding for a while, and can we please make sure that before too long we get that information across? So We need the update there. And also in the next paragraph, it says the internal auditor should provide the committee with a brief progress update each month to ensure the audit action plan remained on track. The completion in March 2025. And it was noted the progress in the last 3 months. It was requested that the update be provided each month. And we haven't had a regular update. Do you think that would be possible? No, they haven't come through to us. So it's something.
I think that's
I think that would be really useful, because it would keep, I think, people's eye on the ball as to where we are. Just a small update would be really handy. Thank you. The next paragraph, paragraph 5, says the chair referred to the action under minute 116 and for the performance manager to discuss with the responsible officer the lack of property assessments and asked that the committee be updated on appropriate property assessments. And we haven't had the requested reports for that come through yet. It will be. Thank you.
I'll discuss this with the Democratic Services Manager, and we'll see if we can get that information for next time.
Thank you. Right, and then on page 9, there is the right at the top, it says that there's been staffing challenges noted, and the head of internal audit was to comment, and it was referred to need to re-procure the main contractor shortly and confirm the recruitment for internal resource was ongoing. And ultimately, a hybrid model, internal and external resources, would offer the best value for money, but there was sufficient resources to offer to deliver the plan. And is the lack of resources still continuing?
So the main contractor has struggled with IT auditor resources, and the IT audits were the ones that were the most outstanding at the end of the year, and they're the ones that are still outstanding. There's a few of them, not for you, but for across the consortium, which they're now finishing off. We've been given a full team again, with some supporting auditors as well, so that will help us hopefully. But in terms of the plan across the consortium, we've given half of the plan to the main contractor, and the other half is split between the 2 other contractors that we used a little bit in 24-25. So that will be interesting to see how that works out. I've also recruited a trainee internal auditor within the consortium team, so with myself and the senior auditor. They start in August, so there is that move for us to do some more audits. So we've got maternity cover for the senior auditor, who's going to go on maternity leave very soon, and they will pick up some audits. The trainee auditor will be trained, they'll pick up some audits. So we'll do more kind of in-house, if you like. And we've got the 3 contractors. So I hope between all of us, if one is struggling for resources, someone else has a resource, and we can move the audits around if need be, so that we don't get in that situation where like the IT audits are outstanding because they're struggling with a resource and we're having to wait for that to happen type of thing. So we'll see how that goes this year, but we've taken some moves to try and help that.
Thank you. And page 10, third paragraph down, it says Councillor Cushing asked for clarification on the amount of money involved in the recommendation regarding the correct accounting of all licence fee income. And the question arises, did you have the information provided to you?
No, and I was also going to ask about the first paragraph there in terms of the update on the current status of the inter-authority agreement awaiting final clarification between King's Lynn and this authority as well.
Thank you.
The amount of money in the reconciliation I didn't have in the working papers, so I've had to go back to the contractor for them to look at, and I'm still waiting for them to see if they've got that written down. I can let you know either way, but I don't know whether we'll get it. It depends how much detail they put in the working papers at the time they did it. But I will chase them up again because we meet weekly, so I can remind them to say, well, have you managed to find it or not? So at least I can give you a kind of answer either way as such.
Thank you. So are there any other matters arising from that? No, thank you. If we move to agenda item 7, which is the actions list, is there any questions on the actions list?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question really, whether the committee would find it more helpful to have something about timing on this. I think it's a general observation about a lot of the papers, and I totally understand why this is challenging, but you look through it and you're never quite sure if the timeline's being pushed to the right all the time. So I'd find it really helpful to understand perhaps more clearly when something is due to be delivered. And my suggestion would be it's always more helpful for that to be realistic than sort of aspirational, but something that says, and Councillor Cushing's picked up a couple of points already, I think, and you have too, when is that going to happen? It just makes the work of the committee easier to manage, I think. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question was much along the same lines, really, was what about 137, 138 and 139? You've covered 134 and 136. But what's actually happening with these? What's the progress? There's no indication. And I wondered also, where does the performance board update tie into this? Because Officer Hem sent us round an update, and I wondered where it linked into the papers that we've got in front of us. I had some comments about it possibly being a little bit more definitive in terms of content, but putting that to one side, where does it fit in with the agenda? Does it fit in with this item, or?
I think we'll be discussing it later on. Yeah, well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So we need to take away some of these outstanding actions that haven't been provided, and for that I apologise, and I need to understand more the reasons behind that. But to answer Councillor Holliday's question more directly, and indeed Mr. Platten's, these minutes and the context of the discussions that take place need to be seen in the context of very significant pressure created on this authority in terms of unknowns, in terms of the timescales that are put forward by government. So in terms of this isn't in any ways, my comments aren't in any way an excuse, and so I absolutely have to be clear in that respect. But the new government came into being on the 4th of July last year after the general election. It brought forward a very significant programme of legislative activity during the autumn period, including the publication of the English devolution white paper on the 16th of December. And it required or invited bids to be made in terms of the devolution priority programme by Friday, the 10th of January, and that included the Christmas and New Year holiday period, leaving less than 3 working weeks for the content of that document to be digested and responded to. The invitation was to upper tier authorities, so Norfolk County Council and Suffolk County Council, in terms of a mayoral combined authority proposal. And those two authorities voted for that. In principle, this authority supported the principle of a mayoral combined authority too, in the hope of attracting more funding into the region or delegated budgets from central government into Norfolk and Suffolk. The government then said that they would decide on devolution priority programme proposals, and on the 5th of March said that Norfolk and Suffolk would be included in that programme. That set the clock ticking in terms, 5th of February, beg pardon. That set the clock ticking on the first stage proposals, interim proposals, to be submitted by the 21st of March, which was done. There was a report presented to full council here on the 19th of March. And now we're in a separate process whereby full business cases have to be prepared by the 26th of September. This is alongside the government also issuing further guidance on housing numbers, which need to be responded to. The organisational pressure and capacity on a small authority like this is significant, and therefore the work programme has to be prioritised. There is not the bandwidth in this organisation to deal with everything that is in front of us. And I think in terms of member involvement, staff wellbeing, health, we need to manage and prioritise our workload much more clearly. And that isn't an excuse, as I say, but we need to be working together to respond to those challenges. Otherwise, I fear that we will fall over. We are still taking forward an ambitious programme of work as per the council's corporate plan. The cabinet have scaled back that corporate plan for 44 objectives last year to 30 objectives this year, recognising the context in which the authority is operating. We are still delivering, as was recognised by the Development Committee last week, the very significant project at Fakenham to provide an updated leisure centre, including swimming pool. That in itself is a large project for an organisation of this size to deliver. So I am committed to taking these resolutions away and understanding why they haven't been provided, a response hasn't been provided within time scale that has been suggested would be provided. I don't think that's acceptable, but at the same time, I would ask that there is a greater understanding of some of the pressures that face the organisation at this time, because none of this has been factored into the council's plans as of the autumn of last year. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just respond to that. I mean, thanks, really helpful clarification, and personally hugely sympathetic to the situation you find yourself in. I think my point wasn't so much around concern that things aren't being done. It's getting a more transparent sense of those priorities. So it's quite hard looking at this list to see, unless you refer into the depths, into the bowels of the paper, which of these matter most and which you have prioritized. So just some way of indicating through this, rather than it being a list of sort of guilt of things that's not been done, which are the things that you're focusing on, and then the committee can kind of assess, how that feels to them and whether that looks right, and ask questions accordingly. At the moment, it's difficult because they're all seemingly equal, unless you dip into the paper. Thanks.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, and thank you for that. I suppose I have two observations. Having been on this committee for, well, it was forever, but anyway, 6 years now, we do have a lot of actions on here, which sometimes even probably almost predate my sitting on this committee. So I hear what you say, and obviously I have sympathy in terms of the additional workload that LGR will bring to you. But no, some of those things have been sitting a long time. There is a perception that they do just get put aside, and this committee asking for things to be done is not seen as a particularly important or a priority in some instances. So what I'd actually ask, if there are actions down here which actually are impacted by LGR, so we can't get responses, then it would be helpful, I suggest, just to tell us that's the reason we're not getting an update for it. Because I'm sure it wouldn't affect probably everything that we're following up here, given that this committee goes into all sorts of nooks and crannies of the council. So not all of those people are going to be involved in the LGR response. So I just think it'd be helpful for us to understand which is and which isn't.
I think that's a very valid point. And in terms of addressing Councillor Holliday's question around the role and function of the Performance and Productivity Board, that was intended as an internal management control on the basis that it was recognised that there were recommendations coming forward from this committee, that there was a volume of audit recommendations which hadn't been owned and actioned at the service level. And it was intended, is intended, and indeed I believe Mr. Hems has put in place measures to track these achievements or completions in a more structured way, that we would remove or reduce the number of outstanding audits recommendations. Obviously, with every new audit that is completed, while something might drop off the table as completed at one end, we're adding new recommendations at the other. The number of legacy recommendations has been significantly reduced, but there is a need to go further. And the Performance and Productivity Board will own these audit recommendations and track the completion through conversations between both the internal audit team and the service team here at the council with responsibility for those individual recommendations. Each completed audit, which I'm sure Ms. Sharman will come on to in due course, the recommendations have to be owned, and there is a management response in addressing what the internal audit teams identify or recommend. We need to ensure that there is the management response is then implemented, and at the moment we haven't got a closed loop in that space, and that's what the Productivity Board and Performance Board was intended to achieve, to bring greater scrutiny and focus from a management perspective in terms of completing or discharging those audit recommendations.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Sorry, it's a very minor thing related a little bit to what people have just said. On page 19, obviously the updating of the audit system has been held up by, it says in phase 2, auditors waiting for guidance from the system leader. Presumably the system leader is the same referred to on page 20 in the second paragraph.
Hang on,
being...
1 minute. Sorry to butt in there. We still haven't moved on to. We're still stuck on agenda item 7.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
But
sorry.
I appreciate you.
Sorry, I thought
Andrew,
you plunged into that.
Councillor Fletcher, you will be first when we get to agenda item 8. It was any more. I think we're nearly finished on agenda item 7. Are there any more questions on 7? Right, we will move to agenda item 8, and I believe Councillor Fletcher may have.
Yeah, but this is a very minor point. It does relate to what's already been said, albeit with another heading, which is that the moving forward of the audit strategy in phase 2. This is on page 19. It says the auditors waiting for guidance from the system leader. And I assume the system leader in this respect actually refers to. Is it the National Audit Office on the following page, page 20? It just seemed rather nebulous. So in other words, it's an external agency which is preventing this going forward.
I was going to say, actually, I should have asked our external auditor to, would you like to come in and just give a broad overview first before we dive in? That would have been far more polite of me.
Yeah, so I'll
Thank you.
pick
Okay,
up
good.
pick up the
Good,
question
good,
in a
good.
second. But I'll give you well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Can I just also introduce my colleague, Anastasia? Anastasia is the external audit manager, so she's going to be the one doing all the hard work to lead the audit team in the audit of North Norfolk. So I'll give you a summarised view of the plan that you've got in front of you. I'll then hand over to Anastasia just to kind of give you an update as to what we've done so far, because the audit has progressed. I'll then answer any questions, starting with the first question. So this is our audit plan for the 24-25 financial year. I think it's worth just starting with a little bit of the context, and this probably touches a little bit on your question, and you'll see that in pages 19 and 20 of your pack. That's 5 and 6 of our report. You know, it's really nice and refreshing to be talking about one financial year, and that being the last financial year that we've had, because we haven't been in that position for a while. But I think it's just important to note that the government has put in place a local audit strategy. A lot of those key actions that are going to resolve the issues that are in the system are yet to be implemented. So we've got statutory backstop dates in place. They've removed the backlog, and they'll stop the backlog reoccurring, but bigger issues around audit scope, financial reporting requirements are still being worked on. So I think that's just important context, because the way the system is set up at the moment, for an audit to be able to be completed, essentially needs to be a near to perfect audit, and that's the problem that we've had in prior years. So looking at the plan itself, and I'll just concentrate on the overview. So on pages 21 and 20, or 21 to 22, it sets out a table that has the audit risks. So these are areas that you'll have seen previously where we will pay extra attention because we think there is a higher chance of some form of error. The risks around misstatement fraud, pensions, and PP evaluations you will have seen in prior audit plans, lots of estimation, lots of uncertainty, use of experts in those areas. So they're always on the plan there as an area of higher focus. On page 22, there's two risks that are probably less familiar. The first one is the general ledger system change. Now, you might think that's a little bit odd because the system changed a few years ago, but this kind of goes back to the fact that we haven't done a full audit for a few years. So we're now doing a full audit in 24-25, in which we will pick up that system change. The last risk there is around IFRS 16. So this is an accounting standard that has been around for a while, but not implemented within local government. And they've decided that 24-25 is the right year for it to be implemented. It could have a significant impact on councils with extensive lease arrangements. I think in discussion with your finance team here, will be less of an impact here, but clearly we need to do work on that just to be comfortable that the procedures that the council have undertaken to identify potential arrangements captured by that new accounting standard are complete. On page 23, we set out materiality basis, so there's no change to what we've applied in prior years. The performance materiality is maintained at 50%. That kind of drives the level of testing we do, and that's probably the lower level, which then means we do more testing, and that's reflecting the fact we haven't done an audit for a few years. So we need to kind of start to build up that assurance again, both for my opinion, but also for your own purposes. A bit further in the report, you'll see a timeline set out on page 47, just to say that the statutory backstop date for this particular financial year is the 27th of February 2026. So that's the date by which we need to sign off a set of accounts. And then on pages 53 and 54, so it's in Appendix A, we set out PSAA statement of responsibilities. Again, that kind of links back to what I said earlier, that for it to work, an audit needs to be near perfect. And those responsibilities of the council and the finance team are set out by PSAA in that document. Appendix B then sets out the fees, and that's just the scale fee at this point in time, but it has flagged that obviously some of those aspects I've talked around in terms of risks aren't included in that scale fee. So that was a kind of a quick run through of the plan. But before I just tackle any questions, can I just hand over to Anastasia just to give you an update as to actually what we've done so far on the 24-25 audit?
Just want to introduce myself. My name is Anastasia. I will be managing 24-25 audit. I have 16 years experience in EY, with 5 of them in local government. So I would like to begin with highlighting that we have finished the planning phase of our audit with the scope and strategy phase, with a few areas in review. This phase involved a thorough assessment of risk areas, determining the scope of the audit, developing the audit strategy, updating understanding of the council. Based on the status to date, we don't have any additional risk areas or areas of focus identified that needs bringing your attention. Also, we prepared the significant classes of transactions work and updated our understanding of each class of transactions, such as accounts receivable, accounts payable, cash, council tax, and others, including using the data analytics for that. Some of significant classes of transactions will be prepared at the year end due to the specific nature of such transactions. Also for the value for money work that has been prepared with no risk of significant weaknesses identified at the moment. We will also update our work on that area during the year-end phase. For the preparation to the year-end audit, we will be working together with Daniel King on the working papers and audit evidence quality requirements to ensure that we have effective audit process. Thank you.
I think that collaboration with Dan and his team will be important just to kind of plug that gap from not having an audit for a few years and helping the team provide that near to perfect audit experience. So turning to questions, if I pick up the first question that's already been raised about the system leader or regulator, I mean, that's part of the issue that started this process, that when you map out the stakeholders within the external audit market, I think there's about 7 or 8 stakeholders. So you haven't got one voice kind of leading. Going forward, what the plans are from the government is to set up a local audit office, and they will become the system regulator, kind of like the National Audit Office, but a local audit office. They've said it's definitely not the Audit Commission, but it is similar in nature.
Councillor Cushing.
Just one very quick question. So thank you very much for that. From what you just said, then this year we can expect the audit opinion you give will not be disclaimed.
So it will still be disclaimed. A disclaimer of opinion, and National Audit Office issued a number of guidance notes to try and explain the process, the issues, and the impact of the backstop date and the disclaimed audits. A disclaimer effectively takes several years to unwind, so you're probably looking at 3 to 4 years for it to unwind in a safe environment. The issue we've got for 4.5 is the guidance on the rebuild process has not yet been issued to the local audit firms. So that consistent process to rebuild hasn't been issued. So this year, what we're looking to do for 24-25 audits will be complete all planned procedures. Now, naturally, we will rebuild some elements of that. So like cash, if we audit cash at the end of March 25, we've rebuilt our assurance over cash. The areas where we won't have full assurance is some of your reserve movements, probably linked to valuation movements. So valuation movements in those 3 years since we last audited that valuation, we won't have that assurance, and it's that bit that's missing. So in our audit results report, we'll basically confirm we've completed all planned procedures. So that will be all 24-25 transactions. And the disclaimer will kind of refer to those historical opening balances that we haven't yet got full assurance over.
Right. So on that basis, this council will never see a non-disclaimed audit again, given that we run out of road and 3 years' time maximum.
I think LGR has thrown in and added a complication into a system that was also already not working particularly well. I think that's depending on the timescales. There is a good chance that might be the case. But I would kind of hope that if we have a really good audit this year, so we complete all planned procedures, following year we can start to push toward maybe moving from a disclaimer to more of a qualification, and that's when you can be a little bit more specific in terms of the areas that you haven't got assurance on.
Hi, thank you. That's really, really helpful. Just following on from the comments we heard earlier about pressures on the council, and I apologize, I don't know how much resource is required on the officer side to work on this, but perhaps it's a question directed at towards the officers, is whether you're satisfied that there is resource to support the audit process through the timeline, given those other pressures. And if not, what are the plans to fix that, to make sure that the audit is properly supported? Thanks.
So the finance team have been through many audits before, so they know exactly what's involved. And myself, before joining North Norfolk, I used to actually work for EY as an auditor. So from that side of things, I know exactly what's involved with the process, and I'm confident that we can deliver on that and sort of hopefully have a good audit.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday. To ask a completely stupid question because I'm new. Does this audit include treasury management? And if not, where does treasury management get audited? And if not, does it not need to get audited? I've got no idea whatsoever, but it does seem like a good area that could possibly be looked at. That was one question. I had another question after that. Do you like to answer that first and then?
So not directly. What we will look at is, I guess, a lot of the figures that kind of you'll see within the treasury management reports in terms of the level of investments, the level of borrowing. We'll do a lot of work around that to substantiate those elements. Our value for money work will kind of look high level arrangements around treasury management as to whether there's an indication of a significant weakness in process, reports aren't brought to committees, policies aren't approved, that kind of level. I guess if you're looking more detailed in terms of treasury management, then that would potentially be an internal audit type scope review, but I'm not sure if anything is in the plan at the moment.
Yeah.
I think the cabinet work, I think the forward work programme suggests that the treasury management report is going to come to the next cycle of meetings. I think for the July cycle of meetings, there's a treasury management report. It's not an area of risk or concern that's been raised in the past, and the council is advised externally around its investments. So I'm not aware of any fundamental weaknesses in our systems and processes, but I would suggest that if Councillor Holiday or others have concerns in that regard, it's raised at the process at the cabinet meeting on the 2nd, I think it is, of July. And if in advance there's any areas of concern, if you want to address them to myself, I can discuss them with Mr. King.
It was more a general question. It wasn't because there were specific areas of concern. Can I have one more question? Which is another blindingly obvious one as well. Page 21, talking about the audit risks and areas of focus. And you say there's no change from previous year in risk or focus for several of these. How do you know that before you've done the audit, that there's no change?
So good question. So these are, it's informed by our scope and strategy work to date. And that's what Anastasia was talking through. So we do a number of procedures to understand the council, understand the transaction, understand the way the systems are working. That's not to say we agree with all of those at that point. There's more of a risk assessment. So is there anything happening within the council that indicates there's a higher risk of misstatement in the accounts themselves? So they're audit risks that will then drive the work that we do when we get to the final year-end audit.
Thank you. I've got quite a question now. It's looking at page 20. It reads, it's highly probable that our risk assessment procedures to assess the likelihood of a material misstatement in the opening reserve position will conclude that an elevated risk of material misstatement is associated with the reserve balances because of the way in which they accumulate over successive years. So whilst we appreciate that this is the case, there weren't the facilities, there haven't been, we're talking here about the 21, 22, 22, 23 and 23, 24 transactions. There weren't the facilities available by NNDC or the auditors at this point to make the full audit, and it doesn't actually state that it was on both counts that this is one of the reasons that the audit couldn't be completed, and I just think it would be helpful if that was in the report.
I mean, that paragraph is almost a standard paragraph in every audit plan. It's kind of links back to what I said before, that if we had a clear picture on how we were going to rebuild assurance on all areas, there would definitely be a risk in there, because there'll be a risk around the reserve movement for the last 2 or 3 years. I think all that paragraph is saying is, because we haven't got to that stage, you're not seeing a risk directly related to those prior years. Once we get to that point, then we'll articulate a risk in that relevant report.
Okay, thank you. Just if we turn to page 23, because I know you whisked through it in your whistle stop opening statement, it might be helpful for the new members to explain materiality and just what it means, please.
Yep, no problem. So on page 23, you'll see kind of 3 numbers there articulated. Planning materiality is essentially our top level. So if we find errors or we have limitations above that value, that would directly impact upon the audit report that I therefore issue. The middle materiality level, performance materiality, is kind of the level that we set, gives us a bit of a threshold to that top level, if you like. And that's the level that will direct all of the testing. So when we pick samples, it will have reference to that particular level. And it's set at a lower level just to give us that threshold. The final figure there, the audit differences, essentially that is, again, it's based on standard percentages, but essentially if we identify anything, that's our reporting level to yourselves. So anything above that figure, we will report to yourselves in terms of adjusted or unadjusted items.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Looking at page 25 and the audit scope, it says here, we recognise that climate change related risks may span a long time frame, and whilst risks exist, the impact on the current financial statements may not be immediately significant. And this is one of the areas where, with local government reorganisation on fast track, one questions how much time it's sensible to devote to this area, doing a long-term analysis, and could resources be better put elsewhere for value for money? It's just a thought, you know, as we as a council start looking at different things in different ways, the long term, you know, what's happening in 10 years' time is going to cease to be as relevant.
Again, I think it's a good point. I mean, our work is directed by the National Audit Office, the Code of Practice. So I think as part of the local audit office's remit, when they come in, they will be looking at the scope of the audit, and that will kind of dictate as to what we do in the medium to long term. I think for councils, and we're talking about the financial reporting aspects here, SIPFA released a paper, I think last week or the week before, around sustainability and thoughts going forward. And I think that's what will influence what eventually goes into the accounts. Again, that's going to be picked up in terms of the financial reporting requirements from the local audit office.
Thank you. Again, on page 25, It says commentary on value for money arrangements will be included in the 2024-25 auditors annual report. This will need to be issued by the 30th of November 2025 to comply with the revised requirements of the NAO code. And I assume that the finance team will be aware of the cut-off date here, and there's no danger that it won't be delivered in the correct time.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because if you look at the time frame, we'll probably still be auditing your financial statements at that point in time. But the NAO code stipulates we need to issue the auditor's annual report by the 30th of November. The key thing about the auditor's annual report is the value for money commentary. So this will probably be a strange scenario in that we won't have finished the audit of the financial statements, but we'll be reporting on the value for money at that point in time. As Anastasia said, we've largely done the majority of the work in respect of that. There's going to be some year-end procedures that we'll follow up on, but I'm pretty comfortable we're in a position to issue the report ahead of that date.
Thank you. This is a really insignificant one on page 28. We're looking at what will we do. It says assess whether the capitalised spend clearly enhances or extends the useful life of asset rather than simply repairing or maintaining. It should be, I think it should read life of asset. So minor thing there. So there's another point on page 29, again with local government reorganisation, which I presume was the answer would be similar, in as much as this talking here about pension and values of assets, and there'll be a limited life to this with local government reorganisation, and there's obviously government announcements of taking back pension funds, and it's going to, again, this will affect areas of audit, won't it, as moving?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what they do with the pension funds, if they aggregate them or combine them. The nature of the work will stay the same. It will be based on, but that very much is, we do a separate audit of the pension fund itself. The figures that then come from the pension funds actuary that then feature in your accounts are the areas where we do specific work on.
Page 30, it's talking other areas of audit focus. The third column, what else will we do? And it says we'll continue to consider the need to use Ernst Young Real Estates, our internal specialists on asset valuations, to support our work in this area. Based on procedures formed at the planning stage, we do not expect to commission Ernst Young Real Estates, which is fine. And I assume if the position changes and we will commission, we need to commission real estates, we would be informed in advance that there might be an additional cost. Yeah, okay, thank you. And similarly on the next page, with the financial audit and IT to support our work in the area, the same would apply, wouldn't it? Thank you. And then page no, I think that one's been answered. Sorry, page 37. The paragraph on the left-hand side says the issues have been discussed by the Governance Risk and Audit Committee. It was reported delays were caused by staff shortages and the need to prioritise available resources on medium-term financial planning, the capacity issues within the finance team, etc., etc. And it doesn't mention in the report that at that time there was also a shortage of internal audit office, and just thinking that that might also have been included to provide an accurate position, because it did have an effect on what was happening within an NDC.
I was just listing out factors that kind of led to the weakness that we've reported. I think that wording has been taken straight from committee papers, but we could certainly reflect on other wording.
And page 54, the fees. I know we get the to be confirmed information. The question is between 2020, 21, 2022, the total fee is similar to 22, 23, 23, 24. The total fee is a lot more than 22, 2023, but there's still limited assurance on the audit. Was there a lot more work done? But obviously, because of the back figures, you can't give the assurance. Is that the reason that the figures changed? So.
No, that was actually the start of a new contract. So you should recall the audits procured under the PSAA contract. 23-24 was the start of a new 5-year contract, and it reflected a revision to fees. Part of the independent reviews kind of identified that the fees had gone too low for the work that was required. So that figure there is your scale fee. For 23-24, as you rightly pointed out, we didn't do a full audit in 23-24. So PSA are currently working through, okay, well, what did you do and how much of that should you be paid for?
Okay, thank you for answering that. Just moving now on to page 65, and I think as other people have mentioned. Oh yes, good point. Yes. Is there anything else on that report? I've just realised we've skipped a page, haven't we? I've moved on to the next item again. Yeah, I know. I skipped too many pages. Anything else on agenda item 8 that we've missed? Is everybody happy? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So agenda item 9 is for noting. It's not agenda item 8, it's noting. So are we happy to note agenda item 8? Thank you. So moving on to agenda item 9, which is the internal audit progress report, March 2025. And would you like to very quick overview? It'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is our last progress report for 24-25. So you've got the last 8 final reports, all the audits are done. And of those 8 final reports, 3 were limited and the rest had positive assurance. So quite a few recommendations going through. And then for outstanding recommendations, we've got 20 outstanding recommendations. So that's moving nicely. And probably just go straight to questions, I think, Chair, because there's quite a lot in there and I suspect people have got questions that they want to pick up.
Thank you. I open the floor for questions. Councillor Cushing.
Are we going to just walk through the report section by section? That'd be an easier way of doing it, I think. Actually,
yeah.
I just one very thing before we move into the report, page 67. I know I might not be the best at maths, but I think that the totals on the table aren't quite right. So 6 and 23, I think it should be 3 and 26. Routine thing to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Holiday.
I won't play the new card to death, but page 65, 20 outstanding recommendations. Is that not quite a lot?
Compared to where we were, no, that's very good. And compared to others, still very good. We've had a lot of work done on bringing the recommendations down. So yeah, to get down to 20 now is really good. And there's not too many old ones there. There's more recent ones now as well. So it's been good work on that.
Yes, I think the main concern's been the 2 oldest ones, isn't it? 2021, 2022, the environmental health and key controls and assurance. So don't know if you'd like to speak into that one.
Thank you. Yes. So I won't cover my report now. You can come to that when you like, but just in terms of the work that's been done around those older outstanding audit recommendations. So and to answer partly Councillor Holliday's question of earlier. So the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board has taken on the responsibility of effectively chasing these audit recommendations up and trying to find a resolution. I think we are having success in trying to address the older ones. There are 1 or 2 that remain outstanding. I have a note from today that these the ones 2202 and 2214, which I think are the oldest of them, to contact those audit owners and get an update and ask from them for an update for those with a view to getting resolution. I think the date for both of them, the target date, is at the end of this month. So I will be following this meeting seeking an update from those individuals who are audit owners, recommendation owners for it, and a plan to how they achieve it by the end of this month. So I think some of them are linked or around some other elements of work that also need to be delivered at the same time. And I know those are ongoing, but yeah, this is about chasing and trying to ensure that they are closed down as quickly as we possibly can. And I think in terms of the work of the Productivity Board, we are now beginning to look in advance of, so the initial work was those that were outstanding and had gone beyond their target dates, and many of them had a number of renewal of target dates, was about chasing those down and getting them closed off. We have a few stubborn ones, as you will see, but we're now at the point where, as new things come on, we're beginning to, in terms of audit recommendations, we're now beginning to look at recommendations as they arrive and asking those individuals, what are you doing about closing these down before the end of the target date? So we're beginning to try and get ahead of the work in terms of not just when they become overdue and outstanding.
Thank you. Councillor Cushing.
If are we looking at if we're looking at the outstanding recommendations, we can move forward to that. Can I just ask on the first one? Because if I look on the NN 2202, which was being, well, I think it dates from 21-22, but I honestly think we discussed that in the first meeting I attended back in 2019 around the income from Kings Lynn and West Norfolk and making sure it's accurate. The update in there is it's not very precise to say the recommendation could be investigated. I mean, the deadline is by the end of this month for that action. Are you able to enlighten us any more that actually that is going to be investigated and anything that might flow from it, please?
Not trying to shift responsibility here, but these are not my updates. These are the updates that have been provided to the audit, to the internal audit team from the audit recommendation owner. So I will chase that position down with that recommendation owner and ensure that we are asking them, how are you going to achieve it by this date? I know there have been a lot of discussions going on in terms of the agreement with Kings Lynn in terms of their car park or their provision of car park services to North Norfolk, and that this has formed part of that discussion. So my understanding is that the position around the service level agreement, etc., is something that is nearing conclusion but is not yet signed off. And I would imagine that, although I don't know this for absolute certainty, I would imagine that the conclusion of that service level agreement activity will be the part that delivers this audit recommendation in terms of their ability to provide the data to be able to reconcile those figures back to our income. And so once one is concluded, the other one will naturally be achieved. That.
Can you just, the report doesn't actually say who the owner of that issue is. Who would that be?
I can't give you that at this precise moment because I've got what's before you as well, but I can have a look and provide that.
I just think it'd be helpful if we could update the report with the name. It's okay.
I think often the audit recommendations don't identify names; they offer posts, but I can find roles for you.
Mr. Platt.
Hi, thanks very much. Clearly huge amounts of work going on here, for which many thanks. Just to expand on a point I made earlier around timeline shifting to the right, very often for good reason with other priorities coming in from left field or whatever. I just wonder whether something that might help the committee is a better understanding around delivery confidence. For example, so I look at this and I see timelines moving to the right. I don't trust the timeline, is what happens when I look at this. Even if there are perfectly legitimate reasons for it moving to the right, I think for some of these, I suspect you'll be very confident that they're going to be delivered within a certain time frame. For others, you may not. I was looking with interest at the sort of green waste one and thinking that feels like to me a lot of work to be done by the end of the month or whenever it is. And I just wonder if you have that sense, or the other committee that you referred to has that sense of how confident you are in the timelines, and if so, whether you're able to kind of capture it somewhere in here. That might help the committee target its interventions more effectively, potentially. Say, look, is there an issue here that needs to be looked at? This seems to be moving to the right regularly. Just having that sense of how confident the owners are in delivering within the time frame in the way that's required could be really helpful. Thanks.
Do you want? Would you like me to comment?
Yes,
if I
please.
comment initially, but I feel that Sharma might want to come in at some point on this one. I think it's a point that's very well made. So in terms of the time scale that is set, that is an arbitrary time dependent on the level of priority that's attributed to that recommendation. So I think there are a number of issues for us as an authority when dealing with recommendations that are coming forward from the internal audit team. The first of which is that if an officer doesn't feel that they can achieve that, he or she can achieve that time priority in the timescale, that they should be flagging it at that point, not losing sight of the fact that it should remain an urgent or high or medium priority for that recommendation. So again, the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board is part of what we're looking at is to say to officers early doors, what's your plan to achieve this by that date? And if they're flagging that they cannot do so, that we will be flagging that back up into the internal audit team and into the committee, saying it is a high priority, it is an urgent priority, but actually I think it is urgent a month to complete generally. So sometimes if it's urgent, a month is just not going to be achievable, and our officers need to be confident to go back and say, yes, we know you're saying a month, we know that's your standard, but we just can't achieve it in that time. And I think that's as much about empowering our officers to challenge back as well, and to be able to say, well, you might want it in a month, but we're never going to be able to do it within that time scale. So let's agree on a more reasonable or a more achievable position. But also that we then hold them to account in terms of those timescales, because if they say, and you're right, it is about level of confidence, and sometimes you will be confident that you can achieve it, and then something comes in from left field, or it relies on another team to deliver, that mean that you're not going to get there. But it's about flagging that early and highlighting it. And I think in the past we've seen creep that has just been month on month on month, and I want to stop that. I want to say, you get a bite of the cherry. You might get a second if there's really extenuating circumstances, but then I'm holding your feet to the fire.
Thank you. Would you to come back in?
I mean, yes, we put standard timescales on them to give a guide for people, but I think most of the time people do come forward with what they think is the best implementation date, and there is negotiation around that. So I think that's in place. And yes, if officers don't feel they can meet the standard time, then they should be flagging that and saying why they need another month or whatever the timescale is.
Yes, so I think that's just reinforcing that communication level, isn't it, and making sure that's what happens.
Sorry, if I can come back, and that's absolutely right, and I'm sure it does happen with some officers, but going through an audit is not necessarily something that every manager or service lead does on a frequent and regular basis. And I think in the past the tendency has been to say, well, if I'm being told by the auditors I can't really challenge it. The date is that, if I'm being told an urgent or high priority comes with 3 months, then I've got to deliver it within that time, probably sitting there knowing that it's not going to be achieved. And I think, as we have seen with some of the previous longevity, the outstanding ones that have been there for some time, the ability to then just say, I'll roll that forward by another 2 months has not served as well. So stopping that from happening means that we should diminish the number that have been sitting there for a long period of time, and that those that do go outstanding will be the minority, and they'll have good reasons rather than it just being the norm.
Yes, I think it's about getting the right balance, isn't it? About and keeping levels of communication good and levels of understanding good. And quite often these things are outside the control of the officer. Quite often these long outstanding ones are ones where we're awaiting information back from outside, and it's often a lot harder to grasp that information. But I think that, making that clear as well, when these things are flagged up would also be really helpful going forward. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you very much. Without wanting to duplicate work because everyone's under such stress, it would be quite nice possibly to have some bit more precision in the performance board report, and perhaps the most, the most exceptional cases have been closed or whatever, rather than just having discursive descriptions of what's going on. I think I don't want to duplicate the audit report, but I think that might be quite helpful. It would allow you to actually showcase your work a bit better.
I'm happy if committee would like more detail to do so. So in terms of the audit recommendation work, effectively, my feeling is that what you are provided, so the work that is provided by the internal audit team is much more up to date than we are, because effectively we are always an issue, effectively an audit update issue behind. So we go on and we log onto the system and we see what's there. We will have our meeting effectively pretty much about the same time as audit doing their update, because otherwise the deadlines for the committee things are very similar. So we're always slightly behind in terms of audit. So your position in terms of what is provided by the internal audit team is more up to date than we can work on, because we're always pushing people to close down or to sort. On the other ones, I can give you more detail if you wish. But really, from my perspective, this was about just giving you an overview of the work of the team in terms of the sort of areas of focus and how, and a general trend rather than the detail of, which policies and strategies were outstanding or what risks had changed. Don't think that was the purpose of the performance and productivity oversight board coming to this. I think in the first instance, committee, BRAC, Governance Risk and Audit Committee, had reached the point where they were saying, if someone's behind on the audit recommendations, we're going to ask them in to justify why and what they're doing about it. And effectively, the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board took over that sort of holding to account, so that I come to this committee to receive the questioning and the challenge, rather than it being officers on an individual basis. It was just felt to be a more appropriate use of resource in terms of that. But I'm happy to give you whatever level of detail you might wish. I'm not sure that was the intent of this, or of the update from the board or from the productivity board to this group.
Yes, I think you are right with what you are saying there. That was the original intention, that you would come and give account in general terms. Otherwise, we were ending up with either not enough people here or too many people, and we don't, you now overseeing it all makes a central focus. So it makes a lot of sense. You're coming to the meetings and speaking, because there are the odd questions that we do need to ask sometimes. Obviously, most of them are audit based, but there are sometimes that we go, oh, actually, and it is useful. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Holden.
Yeah, thanks very much. Specifically, page 71, cybersecurity, which is given a reasonable assurance, has 17 recommendations outstanding. I just wanted to understand that assurance level was understandable, because other areas with high levels of recommendations are given more limited assurance. Thank you.
So that audit report came last time and that was below the line, so I won't say too much. But the cybersecurity framework that they follow to do that audit is quite vast. So there were a number of recommendations in the report, but I think the assurance level is showing that it's positive assurance. So there were not major issues to address.
Thank you.
So
That's
one,
not the
one,
next question.
one further point, page 124, where we've got more limited assurance than we had. It seems to be creeping up in terms of limited rather than. Hang on a minute, you've jumped ahead. Yeah, it's the next item, so we'll 24. Yeah. Yeah, we finish at page 98. Item. Yeah.
Is it the-
Yes, it's the, yes. Thank you. It's the progress report is pages 61 to 98, and then 99 to 130 is the annual report. So we've just got a few more. So if you're happy to hold fire on that one, I've got one on page 71. Three of the limited option reports were only recently submitted, the section 106, the risk management and the waste management. And just, I know it's very difficult with timescales and one thing and another, but it gives very little time for officers to come back. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So on that point, Ms. Sharman presented this report to corporate leadership team a couple of weeks ago, and we did raise that same point. And Ms. Sharman responded that these were Q4. They were scheduled for completion in Q4. And so the report or the presentation of the reports to officers in terms of the draft report, the preparation of the management response, and then the publication of the final report straddles the year end from March into May. So I'm comfortable that, you know, the work programme has been delivered according to the annual audit plan. There is always going to be a slight time lag. And so there isn't an issue in terms of our response time, in that obviously if the report's in draft format presented in April, the clock starts ticking in terms of those management responses at that time. So sequentially, the audit plan is agreed 12 months in advance. There is discussion and negotiation around that in terms of pressure points on services. You know, in terms of our discretionary services, we wouldn't really want audits unless there was a health and safety risk or incident that required an audit to be done in the summer, because our staff teams are engaged in public service delivery during that time. So for discretionary services, leisure, countryside, coastal management, resort management, we would probably wish to see those works undertaken in the winter months, for example. But the programme is spread over the year in accordance with the resources that are available to across the partnership as a whole. So I understand the point that you've raised. It is something that the corporate leadership team discussed with Ms. Sharman, and we were content with the response given that there is a cycle and these were Q4 period reports to be undertaken, and there hasn't been any significant slippage. It does create an issue at this point in time in this reporting that a number of recommendations are made literally in the weeks before this report was drafted.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Sharman wants to add anything, but
That's helpful.
thank you.
Yeah, explanation does make it a lot easier. Thank you. Are there any more questions on this particular report?
So were we going to go through it line each report by report, starting on page 72? I thought that's what we agreed. Yeah.
We're at 71, so between 72 and 98. If there's any questions, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm, for those who don't know me on the top table, I'm Councillor Andrew Brown and the portfolio holder for planning and enforcement, and I'm here as an observer today. I just want to pick up on a couple of points on the recommendations, which I think there are 9 bullet points on the recommendations for fine tuning our Section 106 procedures. The first is in relation to appointing.
Can we, sorry, if we carry on through till we get there, would that be all right, councillor Brown?
Yeah, sure. Sorry,
So,
you're going through
okay,
section
we're
by
going to go
section.
section by section.
Oh, my
Otherwise, yeah.
apologies. Yeah, sure.
So we do, yeah.
Yeah, my
We'll
apologies.
go on
Thank
to
you.
coastal management. I'll read them out and then it'll be more straightforward for everyone, won't it? Including me.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
So first of all, coastal management. Do we have any questions? Then revenues and benefits. Page 74, page 75, key controls and assurance. Right, we're stopping at page 75.
Well, the question is on page 76. You have two recommendations there which were in the past. So the question is, have they been done?
Does anyone want to respond? You.
I would propose that we take that away and confirm the position, because obviously the implementation time was the 30th of April. So that means the report would have had to have been made. This report was prepared in the middle of May. So there'd just been 2 working weeks. So I think we need to take that away and confirm.
Thank you. So page 77, Civica finance system. Any questions? Page 79, the waste management contract with Serco. Right, so I've got some questions there. Mr. Platten?
Thank you. I found this kind of very interesting one to look at. I was just interested in your confidence in the delivery timeframe for this, just as someone that's not steeped in the detail of it. Obviously, the reconciliation of 1,000 accounts effectively struck me as potentially quite challenging, and a delivery. I can absolutely understand why this is a high priority for all sorts of reasons. I was just questioning whether you were comfortable that it was deliverable by the end of July, given the activity that seems to be associated with taking that work forward.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
And also something perhaps about lessons learnt from this. It's kind of asking the question, how did we get into this situation? Yes, it needs fixing, but then how do you embed the learnings from this exercise to ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again going forward?
Absolutely. I think Mr. Hems may have a good explanation here.
I'm not sure. It'll be an explanation. I'll let you judge as to whether. So I think a couple of things by way of context. So the garden waste system has been exceptionally successful and has grown over the years quite significantly. So there has been real growth in terms of customer numbers. The second sort of significant element of it is that effectively there are 3 systems involved in the garden waste system. So there is the environmental health system on which the records are held. There is the finance and IT system, and linked to that, the system that collect the external process by which we collect the direct debits. We didn't used to offer a direct debit system. Everything was processed manually in terms of sending out those letters. We introduced direct debits for the convenience of our customers, but it is held or is processed externally to the council by a third party company. And then there is a system on which our contractor Serco hold all of those records. So there is a complexity where if data goes awry on any one of those, obviously it then needs to be found and resolved. So it is the collection system is complex, and I think we've also had a period of time where the service manager for that area was or the post was vacant. We've now filled that vacancy, and the new service manager has been in post for a short period of time, but is making significant steps to resolve this. And my view is that we're already dealing with some of these issues, either as part of or prior to the audit. And so steps were in place to go through this and do that reconciliation. So we are currently, so those where there were outstanding, letters have gone out saying, we think you owe us money for previous years, etc., and for the current year. And they have put in fairly robust measures to try and collect that. What it's highlighting is that some people where we think they hadn't paid had paid and are able to evidence it. And so I think the actual gap is probably smaller than was evidence there. And then there were methods going in place, right, or systems going in place with the contractor to enable them to be able to report those that are should be coming off the system, or where there are issues. So I think that process is much more robust. The previous service manager was not keen to remove bins when people cancelled their contract, because often they were cancelled because people were moving house, and the next resident would come in and say, "Oh, I'd like to use my brown bin." So one, it promoted it, and two, we were charged by the contractor for removal and return. And actually, the cost of removal and return was almost as much as providing the service for a year. And so, if you were likely to get a customer coming back very quickly, it didn't make economic sense to basically provide a year's free service for that. It has given us some issues in terms of that skew because it's over a period of time. I have reasonable confidence that the process will, to the greater extent, be completed by the end of July. I'm not going to guarantee to you, because with all of these things, there might be some vagaries at the end where we have to mop up a smaller number of cases that need further attention.
Thank you. That's a credible reason for where we are, and a good path forward to where I think we do need to be. Any more questions on waste? Councillor Cushing.
Yes, if I may follow up, it says here that it looks like we've lost, is it 70, correct me if I'm wrong with the figures, but 77,000 a year. In terms of backdated, how much money has this council not collected so far, and how much does it expect to go back and try and claim from residents?
Mr. Blatch.
I can't answer that question specifically, but and it might be for Mr. Hems to advise on how many collections we absolutely undertake. But I think my math suggests that of the £27,000, given that there was £50,000 growth in the figures anticipated, that we're looking around 440, 450 accounts where there does seem to be a discrepancy between either a collection around direct debit or unpaid, whether people have died or moved away for the reasons which Mr. Hems has outlined. So it is important that we understand those. It's important we seek to minimise those in the way that Mr. Platten says, in terms of the interface between both the council's records and the white space records, which our contractor Serco have. So we need to understand that, and our new manager is on top of that in the way that Mr. Hems has outlined. But I don't think, in the scale of the number of collections arrangements we have, this is a significant area of concern. But we do need to action the remedy the recommendations, and that process, I believe, is in hand.
Question that the first implementation deadline is the 1st of July, which is clearly only 4 weeks away now. So how confident are you that those first 3 on page 81 will be met by that deadline?
Mr. Hems.
So in terms of the first 1, my understanding is that's being done currently, and letters have and are are going out. It has generated a number of people who've come back and said, you know, I've paid, I can demonstrate I've paid. It's generated some where people have said, I've told you I didn't want it, etc. So we're updating that information and responding to it as we're going forward. I think in terms of the second one, I don't think a formal decision has been made as to how far back, because at the moment we don't know the scale of it. And so as we are doing that request, I think it's giving us a reasonably firm position as to what's happening, and that will lead to a decision or a process coming back where someone will say, this is the scale of it and what do you want to do? And then the third one, in terms of the structured payment plan and options for customers, that is in place because I've had conversations with one of our customer service advisor, where someone was, and I've had a contact from a resident where they put an arrangement in place, but then received an automated letter from the system because it hadn't had a response, and they were I think it was just a timing issue. So I suspect what happened, they rang and made an arrangement to pay, and by the time before they'd actually done that, the letter was probably already in the post or in the system to them. So they were quite concerned that they were being told that they were going to have their bin taken away when they'd made an arrangement to pay. So I know those arrangements to pay are in place.
Any further questions on that section? Not page 83, environmental charter. '84, 85, 6. We move to 87, which is the section 106 arrangements. Councillor Esfield here. Councillor Brown, would you like to ask your question now?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm just looking at the raft of recommendations, one of which is urgent, recommended by the internal review. That is to review all unspent available amounts that have exceeded their spend deadline dates and take appropriate action in accordance with Section 106 agreement, which presumably does pose a financial or corporate risk because it's been denoted as urgent. But I just want to make a couple of points. Firstly, it's very nice to have a deputy Section 106 officer, but as we have just had the painful experience of going through a budget recently and a spending review before that, we're talking here about where do we find resource for that to implement the training. And not only that, once it's implemented, no doubt the recipient of that will want some remuneration for the extra responsibility. So there's a considerable cost to that. And I don't know if the panel have got any recommendations as to where we might resource that from within. So that's the first point. The second point is, as I look at other bullet points, bullet point 6, which I have in front of me, and this is basically to engender better communication between developers and the planners as to where they are in respect of trigger points or even commencements and end dates and things like that. And I do want to question the suggestion that that developers complete an annual return on each site with a Section 106 agreement. Now, what's the recommendation here? Because how much of the proposal to improve our processes has the backing of legal enforcement in terms of it, being prescribed in planning law, statutory instruments or whatever? And what aspects of this are, well, it's best practice to tweak your Section 106 agreements so that these mechanisms are inbuilt and agreed between parties, because we know, I'm an ex-lawyer myself in a previous life, and we know what lawyers are like. They love to argue uphill and down dale about the content of Section 106 agreements. And I'm just nervous that we're trying to overload our negotiating process, and that to a certain extent might be counterproductive. Having said all that, I really do welcome your insight, your oversight, should I say, on this. And there's a lot to admire in the recommendations that you are making. That there truly is. So I don't want to give the wrong impression to you as regards that. But any additional advice that you could offer to me that I can take back to my planners at our internal meetings would be somewhat appreciated, if that's possible.
And I think on that point that you raised, the auditors, when they've done it, have obviously thought if you can get something in an agreement for them to do a return, then that helps you with the information that you need. So if you can force that through and get that in, then that's I think is what they're trying to do there.
Can I just come back and ask, do other authorities and their planning departments, do they manage, to your knowledge, do they manage to do that in the process of negotiating the clauses in their Section 106s? Is that de rigueur, or are we trying to introduce something that's quite novel on the altar of improving performance?
Councillor Fletcher.
I was just wondering, because Section 106 monies have been an issue specifically in my area, whether the communication of what's done with 106 monies, I'm sure this isn't particularly relevant for this committee, I think. One of the recommendations is that communications with parish councils could be made clearer, and I think that would be very welcome as to where these particular monies are spent, and also possibly that the parish councils could themselves be more proactive in actually saying what they actually really need in order to allow money that's accumulated to be assigned on perhaps a prioritized basis. I don't know. I mean, it's just something that seem particularly relevant to a lot of the planning decisions which are being made at a more accelerated rate right now because of government requirements.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Cushing.
It's an observation. I'm not close to 106. The only thing that actually surprised me was we seem to be holding this information on spreadsheets. Now, I do recall having conversations many years ago with then Councillor Seaward, who, for those who are not aware, was the then finance portfolio holder in the last administration, and understood from him that all this was going to be put on the system somewhere, so it could be more easily managed. So I'm a little bit surprised if I'm reading this correctly, that is not the case. But I guess in terms of the overall recommendations is also, and how is thought given to future-proofing it, given where we are with LGR, was these obviously things which have a long term to them, many of which will outlast this council. So how will they make sure we picked up whoever comes next?
Thank you. I'll ask Officer Blatch to respond.
So I think Councillor Cushing is right in his observations and comments. So I think it relates to there was spreadsheets being used. It was addressed through the operation of the Exacom module of the uniform planning system. What hasn't been achieved yet is the last recommendation, whether there's an interface with the council's financial system directly. So the Exacom system should record at the point of approving a planning application the conditions that are attached to a Section 106 agreement. So affordable housing contribution, contributions towards fire hydrants, libraries, road, public transport, etc. And the ones which the county council have a good level of oversight on. The issues where we probably are not as on the ball is in respect of commuted sums for the adoption of public open space. And obviously these approvals then detail a series of trigger points or targets in terms of the occupation of the nth house or property over a phased development. And so that Exicon requirement at which the trigger point is instigated and payment is due to the authority, that needs to be managed with the finance team, because the monies are then held possible for expenditure over a 10-year period in terms of commuted sums for the adoption of open space. And it's that where I think we need to be tighter in having that interface between the council's planning and financial systems, moving away from spreadsheets where there is a risk that that isn't owned by somebody in the way that you've described.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the S106 section? So we move on to page 93, the outstanding recommendations by year, appendix 3. Questions? Councillor Fletcher.
I think this might already have been asked, but is there going to be an owner assigned? I think this might have been asked just now for the assurance that we receive 40% of income from the penalty charge notice. It seems to me that this is probably a considerable amount of money, which needs to be monitored quite closely.
We can assign an officer, I think as commented was earlier, we have reviewed or renewed, and there was an options appraisal which was presented to Cabinet. I can't recall when it might have been in January or February of this year, outlining the options. There has been detailed consideration given to the service level agreement, which is fulfilled by Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Council on our behalf. This is in respect of the car park patrols and the issuing of penalty charge notices. There is that service level agreement has been redrafted. It's in the process of being formally signed between the two authorities. We did look at whether an options appraisal as to whether we brought that service back in-house, but there were significant cost benefits for continuing with the existing arrangement. The controls and obligations on behalf of each partner have been more clearly stated and specified as part of that redrafting. All of the work done in issuing the penalty charge notices is undertaken by Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk staff, and that is why they've received 40% of the income. But we can attach a name to that, but I'll need to discuss that with Mr. King. The car parking service contract here is managed through our property services team at the present time. I'll speak with Mr. King as to whether that's an arrangement he feels is appropriate moving forward, or whether that should sit within the accountancy service.
Thank you. Any further questions? Page 93. Councillor Holiday.
Environmental health, it says a review is required of this. The last section.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you?
Page 93 and then 2214.
Yeah.
It's something it's a slippage of 3 years. And the response is that a review is required. The process of reconciliation.
Mr. Hen.
Can I just comment? As the new person on the committee, I thought I'd get it in reverse for you, Councillor Holiday. You won't be aware of the history to this one, because basically the issue around reconciliation was between the way in which the environmental health computer system called Assure and our finance system were capable of talking to each other to do that reconciliation. And so there were systems put in place to try and work around that. My understanding is that they are currently reviewing, having had some changes to both systems, updates to both systems. They're looking at whether that reconciliation through the system matching can take place, and if not, how the workaround is in place to ensure that reconciliation happens. I am reasonably confident, because we have done some work recently to go through the licensing income and chase outstanding income, that process is now in place but not yet signed off. But I think it's about whether the systems will talk to each other to enable it to be automated.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you. If I may go to page 94 and the top of the page here, land charges. Compared this with last month's report, and this is one of those which has moved to the right, because last month it was the deadline was the 31st of March. The response there doesn't really tell us very much. Actually, last month's response is probably more helpful, and it said proving difficult to achieve. And given that we're now 3 weeks off the deadline, I mean, is that nearly achieved?
I think
we'll have to take that one away.
I'm going to say I have made notes already, because obviously some of these I hadn't seen the update prior to the last performance and productivity oversight board. So these are things that are on my list to take away and chase up and find out what's going on with them.
There is a wider point here there in terms of land charges, in that's going to the Land Registry Service.
Yes.
And that's one of these external issues that probably Mr. Platten referred to earlier on. So that programme of transfer of responsibility has been over an extended period of time. It might have been that if Councillor Brown was still in the room, he could have given a more definitive answer. But I know it's something that he has been briefed on, but we'll have to take that away and come back to you.
I just wonder, given it's around reconciliation, whether there's some level of financial risk in there. But I mean, until you know more, that'd be useful to do that. But it comes back to Mr. Platten's point. It's one of those that just seems to keep shifting to the right every time we have a meeting. So it'd be useful to put you to nail that one down if we could. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Sorry to drag out the fixed penalty notice one. Just going back to that, and this is probably me reading too much into the language and semantics here, but reading the text here, it's kind of suggests to me that there's a sense that you might actually be not receiving the money that you should be as a council from King's Lynn. So I know it's being looked at and all the rest of it, but there's something in my mind here about a sense of scale and the relationship with King's Lynn, which I might be inaccurately inferring from the text here, but just whether people are on top of that.
So I think, sir, your inference is correct. I don't know where we would be in terms of being able to do that retrospectively. What was identified in terms of the new service level agreement, that this was something that we needed to have greater confidence in managing moving forward, so that there wasn't any scope for misunderstanding. And it's one of the actions that was included within the revised service level agreement that came into effect at the beginning of April this year, and is in the process of being signed by both parties.
Thank you. May I ask a question now? Page 94, key controls and assurance. The revenues manager disagreed with the recommendation initially, and the auditor was going to have another conversation with this person to either close the recommendation or agree another implementation date. And I was just going to ask if it's now been resolved or whether it's still ongoing, because we haven't got a revised due date for that one. Thank you. And the next one, post-implementation financial system review, is this still on track?
Chair, it's on my list to follow
on your-
up. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Mr. King.
So with Civica, some of the modules that we purchased with it, we went through with Civica members of staff some of the implementation of those modules, but it was felt after going through that process and some of the nuances and hiccups of those that we'd have tighter control to keep it sort of the process we were doing ourselves manually. So that we've taken the decision with some of those modules not to implement them, given LGR on the horizon and all the time and effort that we put to get this live is probably better spent elsewhere.
Thank you. That sounds very common sense. Next section is 2506 private sector housing, HMOs. Do you have any comments?
Can I give you a bit of an update on this one? Firstly, my apologies that you didn't, as per the minutes of the previous meeting, get a written update on this one. But I did at the beginning of this meeting, as a consequence of that discussion, email the Assistant Director, Environmental and Leisure Services, and I have an email back from Officer Caps, which, give me a second, I will find. So Officer Caps says, I'll provide you a written update for members. The quick answer is that 3 of these recommendations were signed off in the last fortnight, and that there is a draft policy which will be coming to a corporate leadership team shortly. So I think in terms of that, the process probably hasn't quite caught up, so they're all showing as outstanding. I would imagine the reason you didn't get an update previously, or there were no update provided, is just the fact that that sign-off process, by the sounds of it, has been a bit delayed in terms of sharing it with Audit and Audit agreeing to sign off. But Officer Caps is telling me that 3 of them have now been signed off. Unfortunately, she doesn't tell me which 3, so I can't tell you which of them have actually been signed off now, but
Thank you. Well, it's really positive news, isn't it? That's 3 more off the list, so that's good.
well, it is 3 off my list as well, so that's positive.
Still good. Now on to page 97, cyber security. Any questions? There was comment on that earlier, wasn't there? Unless there's any further questions, we are ready to engage with agenda item 10. Michelle, you've got comments off?
Do a quick high level and then we'll take questions. Yeah. So this is my annual report and opinion for the audit committee. So my opinion is just based on the work that's been completed this year. So the 15 audits, there's no third party assurances that I've relied upon. So I take into account that we've got 5 limited reports, and I consider that against the number of recommendations that have been made. I think about the outstanding recommendations and the good work that's been done this year to get those down. But note the old ones up that are still to be done. And I feel the best opinion is to stick with what we had last year and have that split opinion of reasonable limited. I think that fairly represents the position of the council, and to go for a more positive opinion might be slightly misleading with the number of recommendations and the number of limited reports that we have. So I felt comfortable with sticking to a split opinion. I'd hope that we move to a reasonable next year. The other parts of my report cover internal audit performance, which is mainly around the contractor's performance, which, as you'll see, is red. We are still in the process of finalising some final reports. Their measures are across everyone in the consortium. So there's still some feedback surveys to either go out or come back. And there's still some reports to be finalised. So there is potential that they could get an amber rating. If they should get all the finals out on time, then they do manage that. If all of the feedback forms came back and they were 3 or above, then they could get amber overall. We don't get a great return on feedback surveys, so I think they probably will stay red actually overall. I've outlined some of the actions we're trying to do to help improve the situation. We had a consortium meeting yesterday and we are going to relaunch the protocol document in the next week or so for everyone to be following, so that we try and get the engagement and get people to stick to timescales, which will help everyone, and get the contractor to properly escalate when the timescales have been met, when they haven't been met as such. We've obviously got, as we outlined earlier, 2 more contractors working. They are a bit, particularly BDO, are a slicker operation. So that's obviously helpful for me to have someone who's a bit more on the ball with what they're doing. But I think, you know, the long-term answer will be re-procuring the contract this time next year and getting potentially someone else in place. And maybe looking at these performance indicators, because I think some of them, you know, shouldn't be performance indicators. So we want to get some really good ones in that and not just measure the contract performance, but measure the wider impact and value of audit. They are very contractor focused at the moment, and audit's not just about the contractor's delivery, it's about everything that's involved in that process. The other thing you get in the annual report is the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. So on the internal assessment side, we should be doing an annual self-assessment against the standards. But as you'll see there, that's still ongoing. So I'm not doing an annual one. I'm still doing the, if you like, the original self-assessment against the standards that came in, and the SIP for note, which is the amendments to the standards in relation to the public sector, which came into effect in April. So I'm still working my way through that. But as I do things like the annual report and the plan, I do refer back to the standards to pick up on any changes that I should be noting. I think overall we will be fairly compliant with the new standards. There are some differences, but the main principles of the work and how we do the work is the same. You have got right at the end, I did some insights on those urgent and important recommendations on the limited reports. And I think the main thing that comes out is that the recommendations fall into 2 categories, what we call suitable design and the timely, accurate data and information, which I think is quite interesting. But just that bit more information to help you kind of understand the recommendations and where they sit in kind of overarching categories, I think can be useful. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Shall we work through systematically again with questions, or are we happy, or would we happy to hop through? Okay, then that's fine with me. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Page 124, the summary of audit opinions, there looks to be a slight deterioration through the years in terms of number of limited versus substantial assurances. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, the picture does show that. I suppose we don't, you know, when you pick an audit, we don't always know what the situation is going to be, but sometimes, you know, the council and myself, we will pick an area because we might think there could be some problems. So although it looks bad to some, to have lots of limited reports, sometimes if you know there's an issue in an area, there might be an issue. We don't want to not look at something just because it might turn out to be limited. So it's good to look at the potential bad areas, if you like. And yes, it might be limited, but it's the positive of that is then it gets to be dealt with, and we got the action plan, and we can address all that and address the weaknesses. So it's a kind of balance, I suppose, a two-sided sword of having to pick an area where you might know something might not be right and end up with a limited and lots of recommendations, but we shouldn't not do that. But yes, as you see, the picture shows, yes, the limited reports are going up as such, yes.
So even if what you just happen to look at happens to be worse, the direction of travel is deterioration, even though it's completely random.
I suppose is there a correlation between that? I suppose in the stark graphical format, yes, it would look like we're getting worse because we've got more limited, and maybe we might have more recommendations compared to last year. And I don't remember whether that is the case, but it might be, as I said, that this year we decided to focus on some areas where we thought there could be weaknesses. And that's why we've ended up in that position. And I can't remember if we particularly did that. So I suppose I'm trying to say just balance out with the fact that the audit is trying to help improve controls. And if we focus on an area to do that, we might end up with a negative opinion and lots of recommendations, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for producing the report. Really impressive and thought-provoking piece of work. It raised a couple of questions in my mind, partly as someone who's experienced lots of action plans like this over the years. First, you mentioned a couple of the things that would you think help get to a point where you were able to assess at a reasonable level overall of, I think it was changing the contracts and adjusting the KPIs a bit. I just wondered if there were any other drivers that you think would help push you in that direction. And the second is a question about action plans and this just completing the circuit of you make the recommendations as an action plan for delivery. Does that action plan lead to a kind of systematization of the changes that you're looking for? So are you checking that the action plans effectively are making the changes that you're looking for in systems? Because like I say, as someone that's been through a few action plans over the years, the kind of checking that the recommendations are firmly embedded and having the impact that you intended them to have is clearly really important if you want to move any dials. So just a couple of questions, but great report. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that last point is a good one, because I think when we think about, I was talking about the KPIs, but I think when we redo them for the contract and they cover, yes, they got to cover the contractor and how they work, the kind of operational side, but you're getting more into that value of internal audit and have we driven the change, as you said, through the actions. And I don't know whether we do that, but I think it would be a great one to do and to think about how we can measure that, because that's where we show we've added that value.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that I think will be hard to do, but yeah, maybe welcome your thoughts, maybe in a separate session together.
Let's have a chat.
Because I think that's definitely something that we need that I don't think we have right at this moment. And I think the point on the contractor bit, that's more about trying to up the performance of the contractor, whether that would, I don't think it's necessarily going to make the council have better opinions, because I think that's about driving the change through the recommendations, which will then, hopefully drive up the controls. If we make recommendations in one area and that person's responsible for other areas, you hope that they learn from recommendations and actions and that culture spreads out. But having the different contractors, I'm hoping that just makes it easier for us running the contractors and the consortium, but we get better response times and just better all round, in terms of the service that we get. That's what that's really about.
So to address Councillor Holliday's question about whether there is a negative direction of travel. I think it depends on how you wish to interpret the data. Audit should be about learning and improvement. It should be about assurance. It should be about where lessons can be made about improvement. What I would say is, are there any catastrophic or significant failings that arise in terms of procurement around the council's financial systems and controls, such that there's fraud or corruption involved, or whether there are any health and safety recommendations that mean that the council is failing in its statutory duties for public protection, and in terms of managing those risks, recognising that we live in a coastal environment and we have coastal infrastructure and other assets around which the public use and avail themselves of those facilities. And none of the audits have identified failings or weaknesses in those spaces. And that's where, as the Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service and the corporate leadership team would need to have very significant concerns. The issues that are identified through this, I believe these processes are largely around system improvements. They're around financial controls, where perhaps interfaces could be improved such that those risks were mitigated or moderated moving forward, such that we were better than we are now. But they aren't significant failings or risks in the scale of activity that the authority performs on a daily basis for our residents, customers and visitors. It is for this committee, if you have concerns around the authority's performance in any particular area, you can ask that in addition to the audit plan, that further scrutiny can be given to any particular area of activity. And we would then discuss that with Ms. Sharman in terms of managing that audit contract on our behalf. But it depends on whether this is something where we want to corporately learn, improve and do better, rather than suggest or look for criticism or blame. I don't believe that any of the reports fundamentally suggest that the systems and processes the council has are weak or needs significant improvement. We did, as a leadership team, discuss the relative strength of the recommendations with Ms. Sharman that were included in the draft report for the environmental charter, for example, because the recommendations essentially relate to the council's policy position rather than providing a service, where there was critical service provision such as missed bins or homelessness presentations or temporary accommodation. The challenge that Ms. Sharman gave back to us was that reducing our carbon footprint and net zero performance was something that the council's current administration had attached priority to, and that there were risks that if we didn't meet those objectives, we could see some negative financial impacts down the line in terms of penalty clauses, in terms of the legislation for buildings, for example, not being environmentally compliant. And we talked through the council's investments in the solar carport, the solar array on the roof of the Victory Pool, the fact that we are piloting some electric vehicles for business related mileage. And they were reasonably new developments that didn't reflect very well against the environmental charter, which was originally drafted in 2021-22. So we were comfortable with the explanations that Ms. Sharman provided, albeit we didn't think that the recommendations were urgent, and so they were then moved to being important because there wasn't a criticality in terms of the implementation. The risk was around non-delivery against a policy position rather than an outcome. And so I hope that's helpful in terms of explaining to you the fact that, yes, the direction of travel isn't positive, and that's something I think we do need to be cognizant of. and I wouldn't want to see the situation, the balance move much further than it is now. But if this is around driving improvement and being better, I'm not uncomfortable with the scores that are in front of you. I accept that others might have a different view, but that's my view, I think.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, Mr. Platten?
Sorry, just one further bite at this. I love the diagram on page 125 because it gives a different cut of the issues sort of thematically, and maybe not for this meeting, but happy to pick up with you separately. It'd be really interested to hear what you do with that information. So I think it's potentially very powerful alongside looking at individual audit activity to look at it through a kind of wider lens and go, okay, is there something we need to look at in the comms space, for example, systematically? And that might help you approach the issues through, like I say, through a different lens that actually might have an impact across a number of strands of activity potentially. So, like I say, happy to follow up if it'd be useful just to talk that through with a independent friendly pair of ears, but happy to do that. Yeah.
Councillor Cushing.
Really just follow on for that. Talking about the current year that we're in, unless I've missed it, is there a current audit plan for that, and when might we see it? Sort of the areas that you're going to be focusing on.
Thank you. Any further questions in this section? So now we're moving on to agenda item 11, which is the Treasury Management Code of Practice, page 131. And we're asked to recommend that we formally adopt the updated Treasury Management Code of Practice. So I'm opening the questions. May I ask first question? 1.1, it informs the council of the revised codes of practice for treasury management and the accompanying guidance notes. And the question is, are we now compliant?
So the revised code had there's a few changes from the previous version of it. So within the report, I've kind of outlined all of those changes and have outlined how we've demonstrated compliance with the code. So although not formally adopted, which this process is sort of seeking to achieve, we have demonstrated compliance through our day-to-day sort of working practices.
That's good. Thank you very much for that. We'll just make a comment on 1.4. SIPR's current definition of treasury management is the management of the local authority's borrowing, investments and cash flows, its banking, money market funds and capital market transactions, the effective control of the risks associated with those activities and the pursuit of optimum performance consistent with those risks. And just to comment that, well, that we should be aware that these were tightened because of councils going bankrupt, and that we are not in that position because of our actions as we've been moving forwards. So. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the treasury management practices, number one is the treasury risk management. And it doesn't include, does it include all the risks in all the subsequent treasury management policies? Because, for example, I couldn't see money laundering covered in this TMP1, and I couldn't see the risks in cash and cash flow management covered in TMP1. So I wondered if it was meant to be a comprehensive catch-all for all the risks that were going to happen in treasury management, or somewhere else I would find these broken down. Thank you.
So I understand that these treasury management practices, we prepare these alongside our financial advisors as well, who ensure that the contents cover what's required to be covered in the code of practice. So in terms of specifically money laundering and things like that, I'd have to take that away and look into that point.
Money laundering and cash flow management seem to be areas where there might be quite a lot of risk. And I just wondered if that might be sort of just elucidated. Thank you very much.
So within the TMPs as well, so there's various sections. So money laundering is its own separate TMP as well. So that's TMP 9 has a whole section on money laundering.
Just a quick question on 215 and 216. With the requirements there, is there any timescale on when that might be implemented?
So yes, for 215 and 216, as soon as possible is the answer to those. Next time we do our complete that work, that will be considered as part of that.
Lovely, thank you.
But with just with the likes of 216, where it's talking about ESG requirements, we don't have any, I suppose, complicated borrowing or investment arrangements as such currently. For example, our borrowing is with the PWLB, which is with central government, and then any short-term borrowing that happens throughout the year is only with other local authorities. So that's provides some sort of comfort over ESG sort of more broadly there.
No, absolutely, thank you. That does provide me with reassurance anyway. So we're very restricted on where, and very, very careful with where we borrow. I think that's really important. Is there any further questions on agenda or that part of the agenda item? If not, we can move on to treasury management practices. Do we need to vote on that one?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the recommendation is that the Government Risk and Audit Committee recommend that the full council formally adopt the updated treasury management code of practice. Is anyone happy to propose that? Second. Vote. You don't. Thank you for that. The next one's 183, isn't it? It's getting there. So now, agenda item 12, which is the Treasury Outturn Report, and the Government Risk and Audit Committee have recommended that we review and recommend the Outturn Report to full council for approval. So we'll have a look now and discuss the report. So questions, please.
Madam Chairman, I just wonder if somebody, perhaps Officer King, just tells what the highlights of the report actually are.
Would you be happy to do that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this report is to sort of show where all various treasury management such as borrowing and investments and the like are sort of their position as at the 31st of March 2025. So it considers the CFR in this report as well, that sort of demonstrates that we're sort of compliant with that. So it's a statement of fact, if you like, in terms of the current position as at 31st of March 2025. So it covers off the various line items that sort of make up various balances within the report as well. So it sort of breaks down capital expenditure and etc.
Thank you. Is there any questions?
I come to borrowing, so I go to page 192. I see that the authority has now borrowed 18.3 million. I'm assuming somewhere in here it will tell me, presumably the CFR, what we pay on an annual basis in terms of interest payments on that.
So the MRP is, I think, might be what you're referring to there, is the amount that we recognise in terms of so that forms part of a budget line in terms of the minimum revenue provision we have to recognise in to do. Sorry, the planes are quite annoying. In terms of any internal borrowing we've taken out, so that's where any projects we have are funded internally to complete. So that's an amount that's calculated based over the life of the project and is recognised as part of the budget process.
Fletcher.
Yeah, so to help explain that, so on page 190, you'll see in the middle column there, it has the forecasted capital expenditure. So we were forecasted to spend 39.6 million, but when we've got to the 31st of March 2025, the actual capital expenditure figure for the year is 25.7 million. So that is, like I said, it's a lot bigger than the previous year's 13.7. So going down to the next page with 190, it does show that breakdown, so that you are correct in your understanding that the majority of that 25.7 million has been funded by grants.
So why has there been that?
So it will just be linked to the capital program. So if more projects are being delivered through the capital program because there's availability because of grant funding, then they will be delivered in that manner. But I suspect in for the year ending the 31st of March 2024, where there was only £7.8 million of grant funding, there wasn't as many projects delivered because essentially they have to be funded from somewhere. In terms of
Yeah, I suspect that thinking back over the last 12 months, that the coastal scheme was our main big lump expenditure, and for me that would kind of make sense, and it was funded. So there's obviously other things as well, but I would think that was the majority. Councillor Holiday.
That it would be quite helpful if that was noted, because if you haven't got any familiarity with the fact that the coastal scheme was 25 or whatever, maybe it slipped a bit this year, so it isn't as much as it's going to be. But sometimes in these reports, we've had sort of exceptional notes, which have been really helpful. Not perhaps the Treasury management as much as the other financial reports that we get, the outturned reports, but sometimes that's really helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to build on the points raised by both councillor colleagues. Sort of coming fresh to this, it can be challenging. It may just be me, but just to identify what I need to care about, what I should be worried about. And I wonder whether if the executive summary wasn't just numbers, but had some text saying, here's why capital went up. It would help us add more. Well, certainly help me add more value in terms of any questions to get a better feel of whether I need to be concerned about any of the kind of seeming variances or jumps of numbers or whatever. Because at the moment it's quite hard to do that without the background information. So whether it's formally in the report or in footnotes or as when the paper's produced, something that explains actually, you'll spot variances of numbers in these different places. Here's why they happened, is what that means. That would be super helpful and might make us kind of more focused in our commentary as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, that's a fair comment, and it's something that we do in other reports during the year. We do have that information. Councillor Cushing.
Yeah, if I just, and that's a really good point from Mr. Clatt, and I just, some of us are quite tuned into the financial side of it, but the public sector accounting is completely different to private sector accounting, which I think most of us are more familiar with. I think it would be really helpful because if any, this is the driest report, I think that probably comes anywhere near a councillor, the annual Treasury Management Report. And it is quite difficult unless you understand, to pull something useful out of those who are, you might call lay members. So I think this your positive constructive feedback, that would be really helpful going forward.
Yeah, I think some explanatory sort of paragraphs might be helpful in there. I suppose it's trying to create that balance of enough information to form a balanced opinion, and sort of too much that it takes away from the hard facts in black and white, if you like. So, but yeah, certainly, I agree with additional explanation is needed there.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully for the next time we can strike a sensible. No, thank you. If there's any further questions on agenda item 12, then I've got one comment before we agree the item, which is on page 189. The final paragraph says the authority confirms that it has complied with the requirement under the code to give prior scrutiny to all of the above Treasury management reports by and it should say Governance Risk and Audit Committee before they were reported to full council, because this is one of the reports that comes now under this umbrella. So if everyone's happy with that, then the recommendation is that the Governance, Risk and Audit Committee reviews and recommends the outturn report to full council for approval. So are we happy to recommend that? There's a proposer and Councillor Fletcher, seconder. Vote. All for. All agreed. Thank you. Right, so now we're moving on to I've lost it now. Corporate risk register. We haven't got that. Yes. Officer Hems, would you like to update us on item 13, as we haven't got the corporate risk register for assessment? That would be really helpful. Thank you. Just a quick update.
I'm afraid, Chair, I don't have a lot of detail, save to say that I know that the processes around the corporate risk register are being updated. There is a new management information system. I'm afraid I don't know why you haven't got the update report. I'm not cited on that, so I can't really give you a lot of detail. In terms of the corporate risks, two things are happening currently. So the corporate leadership team is going through on a regular basis the corporate risks and checking that they are being properly managed. And I suppose who checks that that's being done is that the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board are checking that the corporate risk management framework is being implemented properly, i.e. those checks are being in place. I can't give you, I haven't been cited on the report, so I can't give you an actual detailed report of what risks or what may have changed within that corporate risk register. But there is the new management information system has now gone live with regard to corporate risks. I have to say, from a user point of view, other than the fact I broke it when I was first asked to do something, but apparently it wasn't my fault, it's much easier to actually utilise and both monitor and update the risks and controls that are within there. And so I'm hopeful that officers will find it less of a chore in terms of it being pretty intuitive and be able to manage their risks on a regular basis and update the controls and the risks, but also add new risks where they're identified. So we break our risks down into two areas: corporate risks, that are the main ones that the corporate leadership team monitor, and then service risks effectively, and service controls that are put in place. So I think from a general perspective, those risks, those corporate risks, are being reviewed and considered on a regular basis by corporate leadership team, in terms of review and asking questions and providing challenge to the risk owners. And the Performance and Productivity Oversight Board is keeping an eye on it in terms of, are those processes being done adequately?
Thank you. So it's a more agile system really than it was in the past.
I think it's far more intuitive to actually be able to go in and update your risks in a manner that means that officers are more likely to do it. Previous system was, I don't know how to, the previous system was a little clunky. I needed my hand holding to go through, and because I wasn't doing it every 5 minutes, I needed my hand holding just to remind me on occasions what I was doing. On a couple of them, I was shown in the training session that I received to update my risks. I was shown the first one, and then I did the remaining that I have under my name for corporate risks without needing any further instruction, etc. So I think I'm hopeful that it will be much simpler for officers to maintain their risks and to review them and put the controls or update the controls that are in place.
Thank you. So moving forward, we've definitely got an improvement on the risk register in that case, haven't we?
Certainly in terms of the monitoring of it and its updating, I
Yeah.
think it should be much simpler, and we've got controls in place that mean that that we are checking that that is being done on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, that's reassuring. I'm not sure what we do about moving forward and not having the risk register. But I'm sure Councillor Cushing will have.
I suppose I'm not reassured, and I think actually we ought to express some level of disgruntlement that we haven't got that. This is the Governance Risk and Audit Committee, and that means the fact we haven't seen it today means that we'll govern 6 months without looking at the corporate risks. If we agree it's going to be carried on to the next meeting unless we do something in the meantime. It's just this, what we should be had, there's a standard report that should be, just included in the pack. So we still haven't had an explanation as to why it hasn't been included in today's pack, and I think we deserve one.
Maybe I think we need to look at, I don't think we should wait 6 months. I think we need to find, it needs to be produced, and we need to look at it before that.
If I may come back, that's time, cost and money for all of us, isn't it? I mean,
I know.
a lot of us, particularly those that have quite a long travel to get to Croydon.
Well, you've got two choices. We have two choices which we need to agree on, haven't we? We either look at it before 6 months elapse, or we don't. So as a committee, that's obviously a committee decision. There's not, we are at this point now. We should make a choice. Councillor Holiday.
I don't think we can wait 6 months. I mean, I'm not used with corporate risk registers, not seeing them actually, quite frankly. And I certainly wouldn't want to wait more than a month or two actually to see it. I don't think we're discharging our duty if we do that.
Your comments, Mr. Platten, please.
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned about that. My experience of this kind of thing, that the activity of this kind of committee is driven or guided or is informed by that risk register, or should be. There should be a golden thread between the activity and that, and without seeing it, it's really hard to assess whether or not the activity is aligned and focused on the right stuff. So I'm quite concerned to have not seen it. And I share the councillor's desire to get that fixed as quickly as possible.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I agree. Can't we see it next month? And when is it?
We meet every 3 months, so it would mean that there would be a 6 month gap. So
oh right, sorry.
We don't really want to
I was
wait.
thinking there was a meeting.
If it was a 1 month, then we could. It's not quite the same, but because it would be then 6 months since it's been reviewed, I think we have to take a view on it.
If it's not decision making, can we do it virtually?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I mean, I have access. It's going to be like me. Would you like me to see if David Kingfisher, who's the sort of developer of the management information system, is available to come up and just demonstrate the corporate risk register and go through it?
I think that would be really.
I have it on my computer, but quite frankly, I don't feel that I would be comfortable in leading you through it in that respect. But David Kingfisher might be available, and you could see it at this point.
No, we get.
That's a very sweet thought, but it's 4:15. We've just done some quite heavy work, and I don't personally want to go to start afresh something at this stage of the day, and I think we should have it at another time.
Oh no, that's absolutely true. Pointed out by the monitoring officer, we can't actually do it. Very nice of you to offer, but actually it's not been published for the members of the public, so we can't actually do it now. I'll just speak to the monitoring officer and see what we could ways forward.
I think I do recognise it's in the papers to follow, but there probably hasn't been sufficient time for members of the committee to consider it, or any member of the public who's wishing to look at it. It could be shared with the committee in the interim and then further discussed at the next meeting. But if there's something of importance, if it's shared earlier, then that can be raised, and we can then look to act upon that.
That sounds like wise counsel. How do we feel about that? Sharing it and and see, you know, if there is anything major, then making a decision at that point.
Guess until we've seen it, we don't know. So I mean, perhaps that's the first thing we can see it, and then we can perhaps have a conversation.
Okay, then. Are we happy to agree that moving forward then?
Okay.
Thank you. You.
Thank you. This is a standing item for GRAC. Each meeting I list the exemptions that have been agreed for the period, and it runs on from meeting to meeting with the reporting period. The previous period there were 3 exemptions, and on this occasion there's been 4 exemptions, which I've listed with the exemption reason. So it's for note unless there's any particular comment about it.
Do we have any comments? Well, thank you for that. In which case we move to agenda item 15, which is the annual work programme, which is moving forward quite busy as always. Are there any comments on the annual work programme moving forward?
Only just to build on the last comments around risk, whether it might make sense to have a specific, whenever we meet next, substantively, if it's not already on the list, to have a look at the risk register, the corporate risk register, but subject to others' thoughts.
Yeah, the next time we meet is the 8th of July, so which is the annual accounts sign off, isn't it? So are we able to add corporate risk register to that? Yes.
Understand that the 8th of July is an additional meeting that we build in for the annual account sign off, and it, having spoken to external audit, it probably won't be ready for that meeting. We don't have the kind of normal cyclical business at that meeting anyway, so the next sort of normal meeting of the committee would be September. So, yeah.
And it's on the agenda for that September meeting, the corporate risk register said, yeah.
So we will stay with our plan on that we will look at it virtually and make a decision from there. Thank you. Any further comments on the forward work programme? No. In which case, unless there's anything I've missed, we want to go back on. I think we declare the meeting closed. Thank you.